Hey guys, we just wrapped up the Guntersville tournament. This was the fourth stop of the Tackle Warehouse Pro Circuit. It was the second in the row on the TVA, Tennessee River. I kind of have a love-hate relationship with it. This week it was pretty good to me. I didn't quite capitalize on all my opportunities, but that's part of fishing. You can't help that. A couple of key baits. I was kind of mixing it up a little bit this week. I had some schools out. I really wasn't finding them out that great in practice. So I kind of started looking around for some shallow fish. I was catching some fish off of some shallow humps, out of some grass, throwing a swim jig and a bladed jig. I had a couple of areas where I could catch some fish on some topwater, and then I had some deep fish. And of course I also had some boat dock fish. So it was kind of a junk fishing tournament for me. One thing about it though, one of the keys to me for shallow fish was bluegill. I had to be around bluegill, whether it was bluegill beds or bluegill up shallow. Those fish are up there feeding on those bluegill, and then the deep fish, of course, they're out on the bars, they're out on the hard spots where they typically get this time of year. There's just not that many of them out there, and they wouldn't set up till late. But I'm gonna walk y'all through a couple of my baits that were key for me this week. First off was my boat dock setup. This is a 3/8 ounce Nichols finesse jig, and I was pitching that around boat docks on 20-pound Yozuri T7 on a Phoenix K2 765. I caught a good number of fish that I weighed in this week on this setup right here. It just kind of looks like a bluegill. Those fish that were keyed in on those bluegill really ate it really good on the boat docks. Another bait that I caught several key fish on, I wasn't getting that many bites on it, but it seemed like the bites that I were getting on it were quality bites, was the Yozuri 5-inch pencil. I was throwing this around underwater grass, anywhere that I could see like clumps of grass in 2 to 3 foot of water. It couldn't be solid grass, it had to be clumps, and I was targeting those clumps with this walking bait. I'd throw it right over it, walk it right over top of that. And I don't know whether those fish were trying to spawn on those clumps or they were sitting there waiting on bluegill to come by or what the deal was, but I caught several key fish on that I weighed in. The setup for this is a Phoenix X13. This is a cranking rod. I throw my topwater on a cranking rod a lot. I like the soft tip on it. It allows me to play those fish and keep them buttoned up on those treble hooks. 40-pound Yozuri super braid. I could make really long casts. Some of these areas that I was fishing the topwater in were kind of clear. So I had to sit back, look around, find those clumps, see the dark spots in the water, make really long casts to them, walk this bait right over top of them, and those fish would react and come up. Great walking bait, probably my favorite. This is a dedicated rod just for the pencil. I have one tied on all the time. On some of my offshore fish, I was mixing in a couple different baits, some of the Yozuri hardcore cranks, the 4+, the 5+, and even the 7+. And then, of course, some of these fish, as they would get pressured a little bit, I would have to reach down and pick up a drop shot. This is just a 8-pound Yozuri T7, 20-pound high-vis yellow super braid as the main line fluorocarbon leader. Just a drop shot with a 1/4 ounce first contact tungsten. And when those fish would get pressured, you could kind of tell they would scatter out a little bit. They may even kind of start moving around. They've just seen too many baits. So I could take a drop shot and throw it up there and kind of drag it around in them when they stop reacting to my power fishing baits and catch some fish. And I weighed in several of my bigger fish this week. Actually came on a spinning rod. So, as you can tell, pretty much just kind of went with the, kind of rolled with it. I was fishing shallow, I was fishing deep, just kind of went where the wind blew me, and it ended up working out. I finished 55th, which is a good tournament. I get out of here with a check and some good points. I look back on some opportunities, man, if I could have just executed, it could have been I could have been fishing on Saturday, but it just didn't work out, and that's part of it. All you can do is get the bites. You can't control how they eat it, and when they don't eat it good, they come unbuttoned, and that's part of fishing. Another thing this week that was key for me on finding those offshore fish is, of course, my Lowrance electronics. I rely heavily on those, and to be able to scan around and find those fish, and even the sea map, the humps that I was fishing, I could look at them and see how they set up in relation to spawning pockets and things like that. And I was using the sea map and just using my Lowrances in general a lot this week. And you know, those couple of key things and those key baits and things like that were kind of how I fished my way to you know, a 55th place finish here on Lake Guntersville.